500 years before the birth of Christ, 3 centuries before the rise of Rome, the world was dominated by the great empires of Asia. Europe remained the province of primitive tribes. But this world order stood on the brink of cataclysmic change. A new power, Persia, had swallowed up the great civilizations of the Middle East, forming the world's first superpower. The empire of the King of Kings spread from the mouth of the Indus to the gates of Europe. But beyond the borders of this first world empire, a small, dynamic place was making a noise. Wedged between east and west lay a mountainous collection of islands and strips of land, each ruled by one of hundreds of rival city-states. Just one of these was the ancient city of Athens. In the 6th century BC, Athens was dominated by the Acropolis, a jagged fortress of prehistoric limestone, crowned with simple stone structures where the people made sacrifices to their gods. In its shadow was the Agora, the centre of the city, where the Athenians came to buy and sell, talk and debate. It was the hub of Athenian life, one of the busiest, noisiest places in the Greek world.
The word democracy comes from demos, people, and kratos, power or grip.
Mind you, it caught on pretty quickly. Within a couple of generations, the word was everywhere, and soon the city would worship democracy as a goddess.
Democracy is an extraordinary surprise. They didn't replace one set of rulers with another set of rulers, as has happened for thousands of years in the West. They said, no, actually, why don't we try something extraordinary? We can rule ourselves.
In a world controlled by kings and cliques, the Athenians created, almost by accident, a remarkable experiment in direct popular rule. And they transformed their city specially to house the new system. Opposite the Acropolis, people would assemble on the hill of the Pnyx. Any citizen was allowed to attend, and a vote of the assembly was law. The assembly was chaired not by career politicians, but by ordinary citizens chosen at random for a term of 1 month. They were put up at state expense in the circular tholos. Next door was the council chamber, where 500 ordinary citizens met each day. It was their job to prepare the agenda for the assembly back on the hill of the Pnyx. If we were to follow Athens' example, we would have a different prime minister each month, selected by lot, and we would all take our turn in parliament. They didn't elect people to make decisions for them. They ruled and were ruled in turn.
Was this section excavated?
We have reason to believe that this is one of the law courts.
Archaeologists have unearthed tangible proof of the Athenian pursuit of equality. They found an Athenian ballot box.
When it was excavated, little bronze discs like this, 7 of them were found, and they carry an inscription on them, as you can see. They say, public ballot. And you as a juror in the law courts would be given 2 of these, one with a solid axle and one with a pierced axle.
One disc represented a vote for guilty and the other for not guilty.
You would hold them so people couldn't see which way you were voting, throw one into the ballot box, and a verdict would be arrived at.
Fantastic. A lot of thought has gone into this, hasn't it?
No, they want to make sure that the jurors don't feel coerced in any way.
Yeah, so plenty of checks and balances.
It has to be a secret ballot. The courts are tremendously important for the functioning of the democracy.
Yeah. Mind you, I'm a woman, so I wouldn't have been allowed to vote.
That's true.
I'll do it now.
To make sure that the jurors were fairly chosen, brilliant technology was devised.
This is called a cleriterion, and it was a random selection machine. Now, how it works is that individual citizens would have their names inscribed onto metal tags that would then be inserted into each of these slots. Down the side here, there would have been a wooden chute, which of course hasn't survived over the millennia, and down the chute would be sent black and white marble balls. If your name lined up with either a black or a white marble ball, it meant that you were or you weren't going to be selected that day. And because this process happened every day that there was democratic business to be done, it was impossible to bribe jurors or to pull rank so that you were always chosen. It shows just how important equality and fair play was to the early democracy.
In theory, you can be the magistrate that proposes a law, you can sit in the assembly and vote for the law, and then 4 months later you could be sitting on the jury that's going to decide how it's to be interpreted or if it's even constitutional. You can hold any office in the state.
As many as 1 in 3 of the people who lived in Athens were slaves. The Athenians could be such vigorous democrats because they had someone else to do their dirty work for them.
The Athenian citizens felt their freedom all the more keenly as the owners of people who had lost theirs.
In ancient Greece, liberty has an inflection which it doesn't have in our society, namely there are an awful lot of unfree people, I mean slaves. And in fact, not far from where we're standing right now was one of the slave markets in the centre of Athens. We mustn't forget the dark underside of the democratic achievement.
Most slaves began their lives as free men and women, but were forced into a life of manual labour when they became prisoners of war. They were bought and sold, separated from their families, sterilised so as not to breed. It wasn't only slaves. In fact, 9/10 of the population were barred from voting. There was an age restriction, and it wasn't enough to be born in Athens. Both your father and your mother had to be born there too. And of the remaining free Athenians, half, like me, were automatically disqualified. Women weren't just unequal, they were believed to be demonic, possessed by daimones, spirits. They needed to be controlled, visibly restricted. In fact, the first hard evidence of the full face veil comes from Athens.
Women were not meant to be seen. All the evidence of vase painting would suggest that the woman is veiled. She has her cloak draped over her head.
Should we ever have a go? Sue Blundell is researching the status of women in Athenian society.
And just drape it over your arm like that. Then if you want to cover your face, you can go like that.
Yes.
Lovely.
Well, look, I match. Sophocles said, "Silence is the greatest ornament of the woman." I feel nicely silent like that. I hate it. It makes me feel really claustrophobic. Only the free men of Athens could belong to the democratic club, which met together on the Pnyx.
At dawn, Athenian citizens would come here to sit around on the bare rock and debate in the assembly how it was that they should run their own lives.
So we're going to do an experiment in Greek democracy. So who's for?
The purpose of life for an ordinary human being in Athens was political life.
And who's against?
It's absolutely unparalleled in world history.
So the motion's carried.
And
Mogens Hansen is a world authority on Athenian democracy and how it works in practice.
This is where the people meet to pass their laws, to pass their decrees, to elect their prime minister, and they all do it by show of hands. That's the voice of the people. The Athenians believed the name Pnyx was derived from the adjective pyknos, which means crowded or densely packed. The Pnyx covers 2,400 square meters. A person takes up 0.4 square meters if he sits down. Thus, it could accommodate 6,000 citizens.
Important legislation needed to be endorsed by a vote of 6,000. And that's exactly the number of people Mogens has worked out could fit onto the crowded Pnyx.
But it's impossible to count 6,000 hands.
Mogens went to the cantons of Switzerland, where they guesstimate the vote.
First, I took photos, and then I blew up my photos. And with a pencil, I dotted each hand So I could check that this was a fair method of deciding a majority in a large assembly.
You think that's a fair way of doing it?
Yes, it is. Aristotle shows that they did the same in Athens.
Just think of the hubbub of the assembly. 6,000 men here together. Shoemakers sitting next to nobles, and all debating issues which directly affected their lives. Heralds kept order, and there was a police force of slaves nearby if things got out of hand. But we're told that if the crowd really disliked one man's argument, they would shout him down until the roar reached to the skies.
So seriously did Athenians take being a player in democracy that they called people who didn't participate idiotes, which gives us our word, idiot.